Hello, everybody, and welcome to our epic X-Men reread presented by Crushing Comics. I am here with my fellow longtime X-Men fan, Tyler, and we are joined by our good friend Fariha, who is reading this Chris Claremont X-Men run for the first time. And that is the magical reason that we are getting together for an epic X-Men read, because some of us are not rereading it. And today we are deep into the Phoenix Saga territory. We are reading Uncanny X-Men 132, 133, and 134. Also, along with this episode, we're going to read the backup stories in Classic X-Men 41, 42, and 44. Oh, as well as 40. So that is what is in store today. But to just warm up a little, I thought that we could talk about that actual topic of rereading. So we all know that Tyler and I reread a lot of X-Men, but what is something else that you are either continuously rereading or you've recently undertaken a reread of, Tyler?
The only thing that I can think of that I've reread more than once, that means 3 or 4 times, is Dragonlance Chronicles. So that is the very first fantasy novel series that I've read. So that has a very nostalgic feel to me. And also I think the fact that the series has never been adapted to any other forms, kept it really fresh for me whenever I pick up the book and reread it again. So yeah, I mean, I think Legends, I did not do it past the second time, but Chronicles, I think I did it like 3 or maybe 4 times. I can't remember.
What about you, Fariha?
The one that I reread the most was Harry Potter. Obviously, I read it, except for number 5. I only read it once.
Which is my favorite one, but it's a conversation.
Yeah, I know. It just like, everything that happens in it is too difficult. It's too difficult. Not quality thing, it's just a content. And then the other one is Tintin by Hersey, however you say. Yeah.
Is it supposed to be Tintin?
Tintin or Tintin? Yeah. Well,
no, I mean, it's spelled Tintin, but I think it's not supposed to be pronounced as Tintin.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Something I learned today. Okay, so I reread that a lot of time, but I think it was like as an adult, when you reread it, you kind of realize that how weird some of the things are in it. And then you're like, I don't know about this anymore. Yeah, but recently I reread Sandman, and now I'm rereading Lucifer. So kind of going into that universe a little bit more.
Yeah. But in the midst of you reading like whole chunk of X books, rereading Sandman. And
no small project. Sandman, which I still haven't read all the way through since Fariha and I started reading it back in 2018. I think she's now been through it twice since then.
Yeah.
I'm still 8 issues in.
Exactly. So I read that. And then also I finished up all of Decimate era, whatever you call it, like House of M to Gillen end of X-Men.
Yeah, well, a lot of people call it Messiah era too, right?
Okay, whichever. Yeah. And then so then this is like a side project, and then there's this one.
Well, are you wearing a necklace?
Who, me?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. No, I'm just wondering if you're wearing that time turner.
Oh,
you do really. I mean, I don't understand. I know everybody says that everybody is the same hours in the day as Beyonce, but I'm not usually trying to accomplish all the same things in a day as Beyonce. Some days I am, but I just want the same hours of the day that Fariha has to read.
I know.
It's a lot of like, okay, go, and then okay, now go. It's a lot of that. So it kind of works out at the end of the day.
I don't really reread comics as much. I mean, clearly I've reread a lot of X-Men, and there's certain things as I've been putting more and more stuff on my indie shelf as I've unpacked. I realize that I tend to reread a lot more indie books than superhero books, just because like I want to go back and kind of experience that whole story again, rather than just chapters in an ongoing saga. Although clearly I love superhero books, but the things that I reread the most usually are novels. I have reread The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy so many times I can't even tell you how many times I've reread it. But also Stephen Brust, who is a fantasy novelist who has this very long series called the Jerheg series, or alternately the Vlad Tauto series. And it's one big series of books, but then it also has kind of like accompanying series and slightly different writing styles. And it's about this one human who's an assassin in this world of Dragarians, which are all people who are long ago interbred with different kinds of animals, supposedly, or maybe they just descended that way. It's very kind of like high evolutionary, messes with the human race and the Marvel universe. And it's just very, very charming, and it's a great different fantastical world. It's like not Game of Thrones, but it has a lot of those big fantastical elements of Game of Thrones without just being this one monolithic kingdom versus kingdom battle. I keep waiting for it to be adapted. It's been around forever. I think the first book came out in like the earlier mid 80s, because there's a Marvel epic graphic novel version actually of one of them, and the epic graphic novels were only from like the middle of the 80s. But yeah, I've reread it so many times, probably like 4, 5, 6 times all the way through. I'm probably due. I need to dig the books up because it's been a couple of years.
Ooh, you have to tell me all about it. I love those kind of
You might really like it. It's really, really cool. Yeah, because just like the whole imagination of the world, a lot of it's based on like Hungarian myths and folktales and things, but it's like this fully realized fantastical world. And there's so many levels of mystery of like, how did all the Dragarians get like that? Like, who wields the power of magic? Like, you know, what would happen when the empire gets turned over to the next kind of the next class of people to rule? There's just like all these really cool big things. And then in the middle, he's just got to like slit somebody's throat. So it's like really cool balance.
And then we can do a reread of that.
I was about to say that.
I would love it.
We can do a reread of that. I mean, it's something completely different.
No, we will do the read, and he will do the reread.
Oh my gosh, that would be like a dream come true if we had a book club discussion of Stephen Brust books. I love him so much. Okay, wow. Well, that was exciting. So we're here to talk about, really, to me, what is the proper beginning of the Phoenix Saga. Some people start it with 129 because they're like, oh, well, that's the encounter with the White Queen and the introduction of the Hellfire Club, and that sets it rolling. But I never really have felt like that's the Phoenix Saga. I mean, it's necessary to this arc of Jean, I suppose, but because they like get accosted by the Hellfire Club goons. But to me, this is it. They're breaking into the Hellfire Club. But first, we have to start with Uncanny X-Men 132. Scott is really taking charge here. And as they escape that whole scene of battle from Chicago in 131, where they've freed Kitty and Dazzler's going on a separate way, Scott's like, let's go to Angels, because we need to figure out how the Hellfire Club is getting all of this information about us, because all the people have, you know, stuff to, never mind that White Queen is a psychic and probably could have just gleaned it from somebody. Scott's convinced there's a mole. And this leads to a couple of interesting things, which we could dig into. I'd kind of just open the floor. There's Scott taking charge. There's Xavier's resentment of that. There's Angel and his free love. What do you want to talk about here at the beginning of 132, Fariha?
I mean, the 80s were the weird times when everybody just can kiss anyone, I guess.
Look, in some cultures, you greet each other with a firm kiss on the mouth with a little bit of tongue. That's just that's just the way of things.
So the thing is, like, while at some point in my comic reading career, whether that's like, you know, early 2005 when I first read The Dark Knight Returns, my first superhero, and now I have read this issue at some point.
Really?
Because I remember that weird kiss. Because I remember it's been seared into my memory that happened. And I don't, to be honest though, because I was like, oh, did I read? I went through my Goodreads where I keep the list and everything. It's not there. So I feel like I just read a bunch of it and I'm like, oh, this is boring. And I let it go. I didn't read it, but the thing is, that one thing of the whole kiss, it just, I don't know. What is it? Like, why? Why is it even there?
It's not even a greeting type of kiss, right? He's holding her chin, tilting her head, and then it's a full on. I mean, well, maybe not a French kiss because I can't see the tongue, but it's a full on, like, you know, kind of sexual kiss.
And they keep kissing each other that way into X Factor. That's just Jean and Warren just have that relationship. That's just how the friends that they are.
But the thing is, it's better than Cyclops, though.
Yeah.
I think.
But you know, and
whatever.
And Warren did it in front of Candy. So
yeah, like there's like another. Oh, you have someone else to worry about. Yeah. Like, wow, 80s was a wild time.
I know.
Like everybody was was just so open. But yeah, okay. So from that, there was the whole thing about Warren, like Scott telling Warren, like, "Oh, take me away because I need to talk to you in private." And then Xavier's like, privacy from me? What?
Privacy? What is that?
Yeah, what is that? I don't even understand it. I didn't teach you privacy. So it just kind of starts there. But the thing is, I was stuck there for a very long time. And then we spent like 3 issues just recapping stuff. So that was something.
No, but it's funny because also I think like this is the first time when I reread this and I was like, oh, Xavier is like really getting on my nerves because he's like really annoying here. He's like so jealous and so petty, and he's like, oh yeah, no, like I mean, at the end of last episode, he was like, oh yeah, I just stood by behind to see how you guys will handle the situation, right? And then here he's like, oh wow, I wanted to go back to home, but Scott says no, and he's like, oh,
I don't actually know how to steer the plane, and Scott wouldn't listen to me. I'm like, yes, that's because you're a backseat driver, Xavier. You don't get to always choose.
So the thing is, like, I mean, I'm not spoiling it, but do you think, like, what we know about Hawks 2, he's under pressure from that?
Oh, I forgot to give our very special warning. We are absolutely going to get into some modern spoilers here because you have to interpret some of this stuff through the lens of what we know from House of X and Powers of X by Jonathan Hickman. So, this is standard for this podcast at this point and this program at this point. But especially due to a scene with Mora in the next issue, we're going to spoil some Hoxpox stuff. But we're going to really, really try not to go past that. So that is your warning, dear listeners.
No, right. But the thing is, like, every time I see Xavier in this, it feels like, he's kind of under pressure from that.
Yeah.
Because he's kind of on a go mode compared to...
Yeah, I mean, he's also like, oh, wait, I can... I mean, later on in this issue, it's like, oh, yeah, I couldn't establish psychic link with the team. And he's like a bit upset too. Oh, rapport. Okay.
He tries to like puts a positive spin on it. Rapport. So
it's my rapport. I'm just listening in via my rapport.
Yeah, exactly. So he tries to put a positive spin. And speaking of positive spin and rapport and stuff, this is kind of like one of my problem with like how Scott is with any of his relationship. Is like it's always an open field. Like no matter who he's in a relationship with, he has an ultimate, like there is no secrets. Like the other lady will just walk in on his brain and all of that. And then it seems like it started here because like, yeah, let me in your mind. Okay, come here. I was like,
No, but this is a permanent one. This is like establishing a permanent psychic link.
Yeah, like rapport. Sorry, not link, rapport.
Because they shared the ultimate intimacy. So a couple of things continue to stick out to me, and maybe even in new ways as I read these scenes. The first is we see Angel here, we see Beast a little bit later in this journey as people who've kind of separated from the X-Men and done their own thing. No Iceman appearance, however. Yeah. And Angel, even he's been through the Champions, and you really get the sense, or I do hear that, he's kind of just his own adult in a way that none of the X-Men have figured out yet how to be. You have Havoc always being like, I want to get out of this life. And like, yeah, Angel has money and that certainly helps. But just the ease in which they talk to him, the way that Professor X like doesn't really seem to threaten him at all in any of these conversations. It really feels like Angel in the course of these 3 issues represents like, could there be life after X-Men? Which I think has a really significant feel to it underneath the pathos of what's going on with Jean, like as she gets further and further into this inhumanity, into this dark phoenix that we see over the course of these 3 issues, you kind of realize there's nothing normal for her, especially as later she revisits her family. And I think to start out with this, even though, he's a multi-billionaire living in his, special secluded ranch, ultimately a domestic scene with an X-Men who has graduated really drove home the difference to me reading these 3 issues and then the next 2 issues, in isolation.
Yeah. No, definitely there's a sense of the original 5, or at least some of the original 5 basically moving on and having a life outside of, I mean, in this case for Warren, is he still in the Champions at this time, or
that's already resolved? So he's kind of just a just hanging out. Yeah.
So he's just hanging out by himself. Okay, with candy, and then like kissing every girl that comes to visit him. In the mouth.
And boys too. You just didn't see it.
Yeah. Right. Scott got a kiss on the mouth right before that scene. It was just off panel. If we were still getting those extra pages in Classic, they would have shown it. So the other thing is, on their scene, I call it the sexy boot. Right, because they go to the boot to have their sexy time. That's how you say it, right?
Yeah.
Boot. In the middle of the desert, and Jean something's been unlocked through that battle that she had with Emma Frost, because she just is like, I'm just gonna hold back your power from your vision so that we can have sexy times without you having your glasses on. I mean, think of how awkward that gets. You know,
I mean, that's like, if the gender was swapped, this would have like set me on a dark Fariha mode, like right then and there. And I think like this happened to him later again with another character, like, that Jean just buried under the rubble. Like, we're not going to say who that is, but another character did the exact same thing to him. And then it's like, this is just something he likes. He likes, like, this is just,
he wants to be controlled. It's a thing. It's part of Scott. He wants to have no secrets and have somebody dominate and turn off his power.
See, because he has to keep himself in so much control. Like, just because he couldn't control his powers, so he having someone take away the control is what he craves.
Yeah.
So that's
I want a solo series where Cyclops is single. Yeah.
Single.
Yeah, single. Like,
well, you could have you read the Teen Clock series from?
Yeah, I did,
Rocket?
But it wasn't. But it was teen. Like,
not the
so
same.
It's weird.
Not quite the same.
Yeah. So the thing is that, but I just want him, because I have not read a single issue where he's not with someone.
Yeah, he's one of those serial monogamists or polygamists, as the case might be in modern times.
He's always with someone, and I'm like, where is the individual Scott? Where is the Scott without his buddy? Like, without his.
He's defined by him being an X-Men and whoever he is with.
Loves Jean or the other.
Yeah.
The other one.
The other one.
Yeah, and the other one.
Yeah,
like, that's it.
So whatever.
Yeah, so that's we can't forget Pauline. Like,
he's still got a key to our house. Probably to this day, I would love to see some scene on Krakoa where he's like, "What's this key?" Because we haven't seen him give it back yet, right?
No.
No.
All right. I don't know if he ever has.
Yeah.
Somebody's gonna go track Colleen's key on the Marvel Wiki and see if it's ever.
But I mean, this is one snippet of the Dark Phoenix saga that I always stuck with me. That Jean is so powerful that she could stop Cyclops' powers from coming out of his eyes while they make out and go further. So so that always, I mean, that image always stuck with me. It's like,
can she still do it? Can she still do it to anyone?
Well, she's not the Phoenix anymore.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't seem like it's got anything to do with Phoenix, though. It's
it absolutely does. It's part of her.
No.
Claremont has this whole thing about how the Phoenix is orgasmic power for her. Like, it's absolutely part of his story arc about the Phoenix, that she's going to use the Phoenix to access sensuality in the course of her life.
No, I'm talking about how she stops the power.
Me too.
Yeah.
Oh. So okay. So it is part of the Phoenix power then.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean it's just like her level, right? That's how I was reading it. It's like, because she's not the most powerful telekinetic. What's the word?
Kinetic.
Yeah.
Okay, telekinetic around. So with Phoenix, backing her up, she becomes so powerful that she could basically stop that.
Oh, I took it as more like the Phoenix gave her the idea. She could always do it. Like, Phoenix just gave her like the permission. Like, go girl, let loose.
But with the retcon, this is actually Phoenix doing it. So
yeah,
so it's like it becomes really but okay, let's not go there. Anyway.
Yeah, okay.
So
moving on.
Yeah, moving on. The fight scene.
Scott's first time with a cosmic entity. Okay. So we go from that very tender scene to something really interesting, I think, in the run so far, and it extends through the next two issues, which is this is the X-Men going on a mission of their own choosing. Like they are like, hey, let's go see what's going on in the Hellfire Club. They kind of went on a mission of their own choosing to find Kitty and Dazzler, but it wasn't like a fighting mission. This is like the first X-Force moment of like we're breaking in, which I think is really significant. I don't know if it's ever hit me before because I don't know that I've read with this like much intent before. But when they're infiltrating the Hellfire Club and they have this like master plan, although really, how much of what are they doing exactly? All 6 of them are breaking into the Hellfire Club to what, Fariha?
Get information.
Yeah.
About what? I don't know.
Tyler, what?
I have no idea. I mean,
they learned the word hellfire, and then Angel was like, "Oh yeah, I used to be in Hellfire before. We didn't like it.
I'm still in Hellfire Club.
I'm still in club.
You're still paying the dues, I think. Let's check the financial statements. Yeah,
but we didn't like it because it was too risque. But yeah, so then they just decided to go check things out, and without any plan. Like, there was no plan. And also shout out Professor X. Now Xavier is going to be like, told you so.
Yeah.
And they just leave him behind. Scott's just like, I have this plan. We don't need you. And they just leave him. They get on the Blackbird and he just stays behind.
I know.
Yeah. So it kind of always because of these kind of things, I always wonder when people say that, oh, Xavier's dream and the current status quo. I'm like, what Xavier's dream? They hated him from get-go. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what is it?
I mean,
it's like a movie concept.
Yeah, but it will come back. It will come back a little bit later on. Yeah,
but they don't care for him that much from the get-go.
I mean, that's true. I mean, deviating. I mean, switching the topic a little bit. I mean, it always amazes me when Byrne draws machineries, even if it's like a sewer machineries. I always thought the amount of details that he put in, whether they make sense or not, he's just basically, I'm just going to keep, doodling and drawing lines and panels and things like that. And I don't know, it's so dense and so, I don't know, it's just great. I've not, and these are things that I don't think he traces or anything, right? So he's basically just draw it out.
More so even than the sewers for me, that really strikes me as they're throughout the Hellfire Club. While it doesn't maybe have a strict mapping where I'm sure where rooms connect to rooms, it feels very like it's a real physical space. It's tangible. The thing that always sticks out to me is there's this scene where Colossus is like yelling at Shaw for a second or encounters Shaw down the hallway. And he's done the window behind Shaw. He's done the ornate ceiling above Shaw that's mostly obscured by a word balloon. And he had to know that would be where the word balloon would go. He draws this lamp on this end table that has drawers. Like you don't have to do that. Really, especially not on a monthly schedule. People talk about now like, oh, the art is so detailed, how nobody can do a full 12 issues monthly schedule. This is really detailed. There are parts of this. I mean, he on that same page gets away with just kind of a blank backdrop twice, but then there are 2 backdrops that are really, really stunningly rendered, and that continues through this whole Hellfire Club fight.
Yeah, he also remembers to put every single hair on Wolverine
and Shaw.
And Shaw. Oh yes, I forgot that. But yeah, it's like it's there all the time. And Cyclops still to this day, no hair.
And then also the scene where Wolverine was in the sewer, right, with the light shining on him, and then the shadows of the grates. I thought that was like really awesome too, because he plays with a lot of different things here.
Right. And that's one of the most iconic Wolverine images of all time. Like it's never been, it's referenced constantly. It's homaged constantly.
Yeah.
Oh, and then there's actually a one in Miss Marvel number 5 or number 7, like for the Kamala Khan when she first meets him. It's actually in the sewer, and it's like that. It's very much like where he's walking and Nightcrawler is on the top. It's him walking and Kamala's behind us, like, are we in the right place? This stinks. Can we?
And she also, that was when she talked about the fanfic, right?
Yeah. Like, So it was like all of that happened. Yeah. But yeah, so you are right. That is a very iconic. Like it shows up again and again.
And also, I think this is the first time, or at least the first time I remember that the editor basically referenced an issue page and panel.
Oh yeah, it gets real specific in the footnotes.
Yeah. I was like, what?
Which continues happening in the next couple of issues.
Yeah.
I appreciate that because modern days...
You're lucky if they tell you the trade paperback that it's in. The other thing about this iconic Wolverine panel, let's recognize the coloring of Glynis Wein here. There's so many intricate things going on with color on this page. Look at the way the lighter green is being used against the darker green in the water to create these little splashes. Look at the way that that yellow of his costume, it's actually a green. Like if you used a dropper tool to pull it off of the costume and examine it in Photoshop or whatever, but it's reading to us as yellow because she is so masterfully put together the shadow work here that we understand that it's supposed to be yellow instead of what it actually is on the page, which is lime. It's lime green. So it's just like really, really smart. This is why I get so frustrated in the modern day with people who are always playing with light sources and everything making like, realistic and shiny. Here's somebody who's paying attention to a light source, but it's not a bunch of reflections. It's understanding what happens to color. And she doesn't have the benefit of all the lowlights and highlights and everything that everybody does in modern colors. And it's iconic, not only because Byrne penciled it so masterfully, but because the coloring of it is extraordinary.
No,
agreed.
Definitely agree.
I even noticed like coloring and all that stuff this time. But honest, I said it before though. I really hate it when it's like a store, like, and it's New York.
Yeah, and it's
like
New
the
York.
water. Oh God. Oh, and then he just walks out of that and that's why he stinks all the time. He doesn't.
Well, he has healing powers, so
he can't heal. He can't heal his smell.
Yeah, but he's like, I don't care if I ate some shit with like parasites or whatever. It's like,
no, it's not even about eating, but it's just like so skin deep that it's like it just grows back with that smell.
The one other thing I think is worth mentioning from this issue before we go on to the next two, which is really just like a protracted fight for the next two issues, is now that I've read more X-Men and gone back and gone forward in X-Men, I think the three Hellfire Club guys here are pretty formidable. None of them have like ray beam shooty kind of powers. They're very physical combatants. And previously that kind of combatant has not really threatened the team all that much. Like the fight against Juggernaut, it's not scary. It's just that they can't figure out what to do about him. But here, it actually is, they really, can't figure out what to do with these people, but they're threatening. They're scary. Shaw, no matter what you throw at him, seems to be fine. Pierce, says he can crush steel with his bare hands, which like pointedly tells you not even Colossus is safe. And then Harry Leland can just basically squash them under their own weight. The more times I read this, the more I kind of marvel at like, this is really threatening in a way that I think so far only really like Proteus and Magneto have felt quite this threatening. I don't know. What do you think about that, Tyler?
No, I mean, definitely. And I mean, the other thing also is that it's not so much about the powers. It's more, I think they were taken by surprise. So basically, they were not expecting mutants to be part of the inner Hellfire inner club, and the inner circle of the Hellfire Club. So, and so they were not expecting that. They were just
why not though? They know Wake Queen is part of the Hellfire Club. Like, why would they not think that there's more mutants?
That's true.
It's because Cyclops sucks as a
because he hadn't really thought that through.
But the thing is, like, I just want to say though, because it's actually a very interesting. I found it to be very interesting in the sense that Hellfire Club is secretly run by mutants, and even though there is a prominent mutant hater in their rank, but it's actually like even in real life, you see those kind of allegory, like, even in minority community, that there are people who have kind of gone further than the rest, but then they actually do nothing to help the community, but instead find ways to how we can profit off that, or like profit off people hating on the community and those kind of things. So like as like faces of that, these characters were actually very scary from that point of view. And then before we do move on to that, I do want to say though, Edna Mode from Incredibles will love this issue because Storm actually got an upper hand on Shaw, but it defeated because of the cape.
Capes. No capes.
Like no capes. Like it was actually like she got a hang of it. She actually got him.
Yeah.
Like, hit him in the face, and then he got a hold of her cape, and that was her downfall.
Yeah.
No capes. Like,
No
I was laughing at that. I was like, no capes.
As we move on to 133 and 134, it's a lot of fighting, which we're going to talk about. But I want to take this moment to have our whole kind of Hoxpox retrospective moment. So if you didn't want to hear the spoilers, here they are. Because in 133, I'm sorry, you get a cutaway scene to Muir Island where Mora, still tolerating Banshee as if he is a pet, is continuing to have observations about Phoenix's power levels. At the same way that Xavier is so resentful of Scott as a leader, and specifically the thing he says is the mistakes it has caused, which, clearly we haven't had this new reading until 2019. At the time, it's just the mistakes of like getting the X-Men into trouble. But now reading that Xavier scene on the heels of reading that Mora scene and knowing that Jonathan Hickman has read all of this and made his new story snap around it, it really feels like Xavier's like, Scott is forcing this Phoenix thing to happen too soon. And Mora is like, this is the thing that we could have used. Her powers are beyond anything that we've researched, but it's not time yet. And this continues into the next couple issues, but did you get kind of like a different kind of interpretation from this little interlude based on our Hoxpox reading?
I think I got it more that, and then also if you look at Avengers versus X-Men, what happens with the Phoenix, what Phoenix does at the end of it. And so if you compare that, I think the idea was that use the Phoenix power to get more mutant. That was the ultimate target. So I think that's why it was like, oh, it's too soon. I don't know why, but apparently it is. So yeah, I was kind of mostly thinking about that point of view, but then, but there's so many other things that was just bad in this that I was just like annoyed mostly than anything.
What about you, Tyler?
I mean, definitely some of the scenes do read a little bit kind of like there is this ulterior motive, behind the conversation between Moira and Xavier. So I mean, for me, it largely points to how maybe they're thinking of, because the Phoenix is the life giver. She gets reborn over and over again. So maybe they're thinking of using the Phoenix Force in part of the resurrection protocol.
Which I think they have had the idea of by this point, if you look at the journals and Pox 6. But yeah, the thing that really occurs to me is, again, Hickman has done such a great job of writing into what's already on the page that it's really easy to imagine that that there's other things that they're kind of not mentioning to each other here, especially because we know they've encountered the Phoenix, or I mean, Mora has encountered the Phoenix in the first life that she spent with Xavier, Life 4, but as part of the Phoenix 5. So we don't know if the Jean Phoenix thing ever happened quite as it happened here. Who knows? Maybe it happened and she lived. Maybe it never happened at all. We really have no way of knowing until we get a Mora series. So that just really stuck out to me, and we'll talk about that again when we get to 135. So now we have...
Wait. Before that, also in the spoilers region, there is one dialogue from Shaw talking about mutants becoming commonplace, and if his associates and him can isolate the genetic code that created us, and then custom built through genetic engineering mutants at will, that sounds exactly like chimeras. So I was thinking about that. I was thinking, oh wait, did Shaw first thought about chimeras, or did Sinister? So
well, and it certainly adds some context to Shaw being part of the Quiet Council.
Mm-hmm. And wasn't there a retcon somewhere that inserted Sinister into the Hellfire Club, the inner circle of the Hellfire Club somewhere? And
No.
Shaw's history.
Yeah, but I think it's in the Hellfire Club, the flashbacky Hellfire Club miniseries. I don't know if it's the contemporary Hellfire Club. I'd have to check my guide.
He seems sleazy enough that to be in Hellfire Club at least once in his life, just to have fun, just to figure out. Just like Warren, he just went in there. It's like, oh, what is this about? It's like, I don't like it.
He might have just been there for the parties, honestly.
Well, no, hold on. Well, there is the relationship with him and Shaw that X-Men Legacy that we saw. That him, Shaw, Xavier, and then there was another person that he experimented with.
True. See, you are an expert now.
Yeah, there you go.
Just wait.
There you go.
Just wait. So there he had some connection with Hellfire Clubs at least once.
Yeah.
So one thing I do want to say though is like before I go into my rant, as much as I was like, okay, what is the point of Dark Phoenix if we know the retcon that you guys talked about? Is like, oh, okay, sure. But the thing is like, Dark Phoenix, like with the hairdo and everything, she looks so good with a permanent smirk on her face. Like it's like there's just a smirk on her face.
Yeah.
But then I just want to kind of mention this one bit. So I mean, yeah, with like everything with Jason and everything, we already talked about whatever. But the other thing I was actually talking about is like like these days we have this whole idea of like sensitivity reader, someone you actually get to read this and then kind of figure out what you wrote is like, okay. So the whole thing is that the X-Men are captured, right? And there's only one Black character.
Oh my God.
Hold on, let me finish.
I know.
What is the Black character portrayed as? Okay, first of all, okay. And then you're like, okay, maybe
we'll say it because some people are listening and don't. She's portrayed as
a slave.
An escaped slave, right?
Yeah, an escaped, like a turncoat slave, which is actually like written out in the next issue.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the art, you don't even need to interpret that. If you have read enough stories and if you have read enough pictures and everything, you pick that out right away, right? All the other characters are in like their whatever costume appropriate. The Black character is that.
Right.
She's called a slave, and then she actually is like a slave, because, and then she's the only one who is beaten. Yeah. Like she's the only one who is beaten.
By Jean, who's holding a whip.
Yeah. By a whip.
Yeah.
I mean, okay. So all of that. Then in the next issue, whether it's Jean, whether it's Phoenix, whoever, the character says, "You made me live my deepest, darkest fantasy." Is that your deepest, darkest fantasy? That you are a slave owner? I mean, if you kind of think about, put that all together, it's just such a bad, and you know how you can avoid it? Just put Storm in a dress. It doesn't matter. She doesn't have to be a slave. It doesn't have to be. And the thing is this is the second time she was beaten in two back-to-back, two things that
it's right. Two issues in a row where she's been singled out as there's all these tough men, X-Men, but we're going to beat up Storm. And both times it's very gendered. It's very potentially racial. In the previous one, it certainly is here.
Right. And the thing is, in both cases, it was the women violence against women.
Yes.
So you cannot show women beating up men because, oh my God, their penis will shrivel. So we have to show this. And then it was both cases, at least in the previous one, you kind of get the feeling, and maybe because I know so much about Emma in retrospect, that you think that Emma singled her out because she's the most powerful, compared to the others. She's more cunning. She knows that, okay, these other two dumbos, they're just physical. I don't have to deal with, but I have to deal with her. But the thing is, when I know nothing about Jean or how she is and everything, her singling this out, and then it just the whole thing. It just, I was just it's just terrible. It's terrible. It's like a useful whip, and then the whole it's not.
But
I was not happy.
Okay, but if you think about it, I agree with the first part. Why make her an escaped slave, right? So, but then if you if you separate it out, say, okay, let's say, casting her as the slave is a given, then it kind of makes sense because she's not going to hit any other people who are not a slave.
Right, but the thing is, in this process, you made Jean a racist.
And made that her fantasy. That's her power fantasy.
Made that her fantasy.
Yeah, but
so that's what I'm saying. Like, it's like, because I absolutely believe characters are what the writers write them. The writers make or break a character. So by not thinking this through, the same way how Batman is actually Bruce Wayne is actually Jewish now, and nobody talks about it, you have done Jean as fantasize about being a white slaver. What?
Well, and the other thing too that I think comes out of actually having like a sensitivity read and a thought about this is when you say, oh, well, it's the 1700s and we have this black character, so that black character must be a slave in this fantasy version, then you back yourself into this corner of like, well, now I've got to think about, I'm certain Claremont thought about this, but I mean, not to put thoughts in his head, but it just seems really obvious to me where he's like, well, I guess if Storm is going to be a slave, Jean should probably slap her, which is like so many levels of messed up, as Fariha has outlined. But you put yourself in this corner because you started with the assumption that because you have one black character who's an African character. At this point, Storm, I don't think we could fairly call her an African American. She's an African character. African. And just because you have her, you've got to go down this road. Every time I read it and I get to that sequence, part of my brain always goes, oh, but they're not going to make it literal, right? They're just going to leave that to us as the reader to assume that there's this slavery thing. And that's on us to project. Nope. And then it gets made literal every time. And every time I just kind of like wince and my stomach turns like, why? Why would you go down this path?
The other characters, what do you call it? What's his name? Nightcrawler. Colossus. He just looks like, Colossus looks like just a white man. Nightcrawler looks like a white man. So
and they don't really deal with their otherness, right? They don't deal with the fact that Nightcrawler is German. Would there have been a German in this particular colony that Mastermind has devised? Would anybody even have any knowledge of a Russian in this colony that Mastermind has devised? But it kind of goes down the path of perceived least persistence to play out the slavery thing. It could have even been more interesting for Storm to just be an African aristocrat. Right, which existed, and for Jean to talk down to her, and for somebody to be like you don't get to talk to people like that just because of the color of their skin. Like there's so many other places that I think if you were to write a similar sequence for Jean today, where she's kind of stuck in a previous time, there's so many other ways you could have written this other than the path that Claremont went down. And here's the thing, you can say, oh, it's of a time, but that still was disgusting to do in 1980. This is not one of these things where like somebody wore blackface 2 years ago and it's like, well, they were younger then. No, blackface was still disgusting 2 years ago. I really...
The other way to kind of get out of that would have been that if Storm actually confronted her, like,
right.
I know
give Storm agency. We've talked about this a lot, that Storm often comes out better than Jean because Claremont often gives Storm the agency in these situations, and instead of just,
Yeah, so exactly. So I know that it's like, go after this. There's so little time, but at least at some point have her talk to her as like, hey, what you did to me was not right, or something along that line. I don't know. I was just like, ugh. I was not.
But in this case, the other X-Men live that fantasy. Were they transported back?
Well, they're all on the scene.
They were all on the scene, but
they don't actually see it though, right?
Right. They're like, why is this person cheating?
Why is she? So, which is why
she's called slave, and then Storm has like
has thought balloons that say slave.
Like slave. Yeah. What are you talking about? So
there was this element of like
felt?
But she also probably wouldn't be able to confront her. She would confront her for using that word.
Right.
That's true.
Right. Doesn't it feel like Storm's response would be like, I'm no man or woman's slave? Like that seems like a gimme kind of Storm response to that situation.
No, even later, it's like, okay, what was going on in your head?
Yeah,
like,
that's true.
But but the thing is like, and here's the thing, because he have done all of this, now there's the retcon you said, like, oh, it was Phoenix all along. I'm like, what a cop-out. Let me hate Jean properly.
It wasn't a Claremont retcon.
Who's retcon?
We'll get there.
That's a big story behind the scenes and everything. But you also notice that the Black Queen has a mole and Jean doesn't have one. Because having a mole is evil.
Yeah, that's true. And it's beautiful. Hey, I'm telling you, girl looks so pretty in this. Like, the whole get up, with the hairdo and everything. Oh, I was like, But yeah, so that's that. But yeah, everything else.
Well, look, there's basically two and a half other components to these two pair of issues. One component is Wolverine slicing and dicing his way up to the fight again, which becomes plot significant many, many, many years later, that he actually, and again, in terms of things that we haven't seen a whole lot, he is really carving up these Hellfire guards on panel in a way that we have not really seen him carve up human beings to this point in the run. There's definitely this sense for the first time that Wolverine, left to his own devices and in a very desperate situation, really has no compunctions about going as hard as he needs to go. He's hinted at this many times, but we have not seen it on panel before now.
Yeah. Right. And this happens. And guess what those people becomes?
Reavers!
Exactly!
I know it now! I know it! But the thing is, like, given that I know so much about Wolverine, like now, I didn't even blink. I'm like, oh, that's normal! I didn't even think that all this stuff he hasn't necessarily did it. But the thing is, I actually went ahead and read 137. There's like one panel of Wolverine in 137. I'm like, oh, this is so perfect. Like, we'll talk about it later. But the thing is, like, I didn't even blink my eyes at this. I was like, these people, like, but now that you said they become Reavers, I'm like, oh, so perfect.
And also, I think the other thing is like Senator Kelly is name drop here.
Yeah, that's my half a thing. We get another scene with him upcoming, but Shaw, it's interesting. Like Shaw's really set a clever trap here. Even if he didn't know that the X-Men were going to show up, he kind of knew that they had Jean in their pocket now and that he was going to do something to try to start to influence Shaw as this presidential candidate, to influence Kelly as this presidential candidate. So that was the half a thing. And then the other thing is the end of this mastermind plot, right? So Scott uses his psychic rapport with Jean to backdoor his way into her fantasy world because he's like at the mental level. And Jean is very confused to see him there. And Scott gets into this duel with Mastermind. Now, today, we've seen so many of these scenes that it's like maybe not as striking. But at the time, the idea that Scott, as a non-psychic, is just going to kind of like army crawl his way into the psychic plane via the report and like put up a fight there. It's actually, this is like a really big gag at that time. Like the fact that would even happen, because first of all, we've only ever really just seen the astral plane in the psychic dance-off with Xavier only like 13 or 14 issues ago. And two, you just would not assume that Scott could do this. So again, even though he ostensibly loses, he wins by losing because he shocks Jean out of her reverie by her seeing him get stabbed mentally by Mastermind, which, and I've been really waiting for Fariha's reaction to this, so I'm so eager to finally hear it. Jean just explodes Mastermind's mind in retaliation for everything that Mastermind has done to Jean. So Fariha, I've been waiting for your reaction to Mastermind's fate at the end of 134. I'm so ready to hear what you thought about it.
So one thing I do want to mention, that the first one is like, Scott doing this whole mental dance off on his own to kind of get that. I was like, that Cyclops, let me hate you properly, because that is so cool. Because that was like, that was smart, right?
Yeah, that's really clever.
Was like super. super clever. And then, you kind of thought of it. And so I'm like, oh, like, this is why I'm telling you, he just need to be single. He just need to be single, doing his own thing. And I'll be okay. I love him in AVX Consequences, by the way. Why? Because he's one on his own. So, so that's what I'm saying. Like, I was like, oh, like that was like, I'm like, and then the whole other thing that, the whole like how she kind of got rid of like take care of Shaw and everything, which it's very cool. Like it's absolutely like it's like she pretty much just turns him into a mush, and then it's like, oh, you have all these thoughts and everything and all that. It's cool, but then also at the same time, like we talked about it before, like it's like, why is it that every time a woman doing something cool is because, oh my god, this man had a control over me, but now I'm beyond that. It's like, please. It's just another one of those, right? So it just kind of takes it away. But then apparently this is not even Jean, this is Phoenix. So it's like, okay, then why were you in there in the first place? so I don't know. I have mixed feelings. I have a lot of conflicted mixed feelings.
I mean, I think for all intents and purposes, this the reaction, we can say that it is a Jean reaction. Because it's Phoenix, copying her as a person. So even though, it's not Jean physically and, in that sense, but I mean, let's just say that her thoughts and her actions and her reaction to things stems from Jean.
Okay. No, well, I thought that was like, I'm like, yeah, let's do this.
Well, there's an argument.
Him up in like this, I don't know what she did to him. She's just a mush.
So I have a few things to say in response to that. So first of all, an argument can be made that this is the moment that Jean turns into Dark Phoenix. It's not necessarily all of Mastermind's manipulations of her. For all of that, she was still herself. You could make the argument that it's in this moment of pure revenge against him, which is not characteristic for Jean, no matter how warranted it certainly is towards Mastermind. That's that final moment where he Mastermind did manage to unleash Dark Phoenix in the worst way possible for him by making Jean so angry that she kind of breaks down the last barriers that were connecting her to her humanity, because she turns to Dark Phoenix shortly after the scene with no provocation. Another thing that I always forget before rereading this, they're just on their ship. They're like, we got away, hooray. And then Jean is like, no, fear me. But anyway, I'm not quite ready to go there yet. The other thing that I maybe thought about for the first time this time, because of reading it with you and the remarks that you've made, Fariha, is, we always deal with how women get these universal powers and they're like, oh no, I can't handle it. But here's Claremont kind of reversing that for a second, where Jean says to Mastermind, oh, you want the power of the universe? You want what's going on in my head? You think you can handle that? You want that unbridled power? Here it is. And he just turns into a gibbering mess. Like, it really does kind of feel like Claremont saying, look, I've put a lot of impediments in Jean's path, and I get that it seems that she's like falling prey to this power a lot, but look what happens to this other male hero who gets 1 second of a glimpse into Jean's head. His body can't even tolerate it. So I've never seen that before, but now I'm like, oh, is that what Claremont's trying to do with this fate for Mastermind?
I wish I didn't read AVX. That I because we have AVX has much different interpretation of like what different people can do with the power and how they actually deal with that. But then I also kind of know what happens in 137. I'm like, ugh. So I think that's one of the reasons I wasn't but I was impressed by the fact that he had it coming. Like, he definitely had it coming. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, it's another one of those. It's like, oh, this man gaslighted me and all of that. So now I'm finally free. Now I can finally be who I want to be. I'm like, when did Superman have to deal with that? Like that's kind of like, and then, also like, he's so ugly.
He's very creepy. That's why he's with his pointy chin and his long witch nose. Yeah.
I mean, I thought that was his normal look, but no, that's a projection too.
Oh, you mean the good-looking one?
Yeah, I thought
Jason is a projection.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I thought that was his normal look.
Wait, I thought I pointed out the shadow twice to you.
But she didn't know how ugly he was gonna be. Just the shadow.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I thought that even in the shadow, he probably looked that.
Okay.
Something. But then this was like, I was like, whoa. I'm like, yeah. But other thing, because remember how I was like mad about, like, I'm like, why isn't like Emma controlling her? It's Emma's technology.
Yeah,
Like,
Emma is
so why isn't she not doing this? Why is she not doing this?
She doesn't have the mastermind reality power.
Oh, please! Apparently, she and as if like Emma Frost that we know can't. Like,
well, at that point,
make that
time.
work.
Yeah,
I was like, it's her technology. I'm like, there's another thing, another example. Men taking women's, accomplishment and using it to their thing. Mm-mm. Oh, and then this is when she learned that Emma did it. Like, ooh.
Right, it was Emma all along, whole
Yeah.
time. Still, Emma
She's
messing with
coming
Jean.
for you.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I kind of want to point out, I mean, it's not really the main thing here, is that like this is the first time Wolverine says, to Cyclops when they are running away from the fight, that you are the boss. He's not complaining anymore. He's not going down the route of like, oh yeah, you made me run away from a fight. But then he's just like, oh, I hate leaving a fight half finished, but you are the boss. So
because he just doesn't want them to see all the dead bodies. All those
True.
all
Yeah, because they don't know what they don't know won't hurt them.
Yeah, so it's like, let's run away from here.
Right. And also,
I just created a bunch of reavers.
And also in my mind, like, this is the first time Cyclops and Wolverine, had that moment, because they met in the dark, and then Wolverine light the match. Is like,
Watch where you put your hands.
Yeah.
The only other thing I really take away from this, again, this 134 is the first issue that I had of this in the original floppies that I got at a comic convention probably when I was 10 years old. I had 134, 135, 136, 137. So I didn't know all the stuff that happened before, but 134 does a pretty good job of recapping it. So I've read this so many times. And the other thing that really strikes me now that I get to read 132, 133 with it is, this to me is a good comic book fight reversal, right? They fight Shaw the first time. Shaw just takes them apart because they can't figure out how to get around his powers. And they fight him a second time and they work together, and it actually is clever, right? Cyclops shoots a hole through the floor. Shaw falls through the floor. He's like, well, that can't stop me. But then Nightcrawler's like, I can keep you off balance without ever really impacting you, because that's a circus thing. Like, I do all these things without hurting anybody. So Nightcrawler basically just does a circus routine on Shaw, and it's really clever because Shaw never stops being scary. The whole time I'm reading it, I'm like, what if he gets his leg, whatever. And then Storm's like, I don't need to hit you with lightning. I can just make you really cold. And to me, I'm like, this finally is starting to feel like we're not getting the same fights over and over again. It's finally feeling like they learned something. And it finally feels like there's a give and take. Like, I still want the enemy to be scary. It's no fun if the X-Men just like roll right through the bad guy every single time. And this to me was an example of like, okay, here's somebody who I'm interested to see them fight again, because it's going to be different every time, no matter what happens. They're very evenly matched.
And this is also like the issue where, when you see a revolver in a drawer in scene 2 comes into play in the very last scene, because Wolverine was in the sewer and he's like, oh, let me slash the wire first. And then it comes into play. So like 2 issues ago, and then it came into play. It gets a little bit of a payoff here where everything just goes dark.
Well, that's, I think, a great moment to stop our discussion of these 3 issues and pivot into the classic X-Men issues that we read alongside here. Now, these we're reading we're reading 1 that actually fits just before this, which is a Nightcrawler story in Classic 40. And then we're reading 3 that absolutely don't. And the reason we are is because Classic 41 and 42 partially contain the reprints of some of these issues. And it's a Scott Summers at the orphanage being influenced by Mr. Sinister story, which if we had been doing a whole reading of Classic X-Men, we would have read it even before issue 1 of the original 1963 X-Men. Similarly, we have Rogue kind of being led more deeply into Mystique's world, which probably is happening a little bit before this, since we're about to meet Rogue in just about 10-ish issues. But again, we're just going to make these fit here because this is a good point to read them. So first, we have Classic 40. It's a story by Tom Orzechowski, who's the letterer. And it's an odd story of Nightcrawler's belief that a young girl with a disability on the streets of New York City may be a powerful mutant. What do you think about this New York street scene, Tyler?
Well, it's New York City. No one cares if someone jumps over a turnstile in a subway station. It happens all the time. I've even seen people do.
I was waiting for you to say that.
I've even seen people do that half turnstile thing. So what happened is that when you pull halfway, it will snap back into the ring. So people will pull halfway the turnstile, step over into that gap, push back, and they go through. So this happens all the time. So no surprise. And Kurt was like, "Oh, why didn't anyone stop her?" or something like that. No.
That doesn't happen. I know that.
But it's also a story of the time, right? Because it mentions like people getting salary on a Friday with cash, like that kinds of dates it a little bit.
Yeah, it's a different 1980 was a different world.
Yeah.
I thought it was an okay issue, but at the same time, there was this one woman that was telling something. I wasn't quite sure.
She's like flashing back to her mom.
Yeah.
Right.
It just was a lot. It was a lot of that cut back and forth flashback for a brief issue.
Right. And then the thing is, like, I wasn't quite sure also, like, if she was a mutant or not. I wish she was, and she was brought back. I wish this was like someone that we now know and love, but it kind of necessarily wasn't the case. So it was just one of them, like, oh, okay, especially if you read it based on like, when they went to find Dazzler and Kitty, and then the fact that this is kind of like a part of the same initiative, it kind of reads really well. But then, it just on its own, it's like, okay, sure.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to steer us to classic. I agree. I don't really have a lot to say. I mean, it's a fine issue. I enjoy that Nightcrawler really is committed to wanting to just befriend this person. Like other people are kind of like, let's go find the mutant. You're a mutant. But Nightcrawler actually like wants to learn about her and try to tell her that there's this better or different life. And it's interesting because I definitely think Orzechowski is trying to parallel Nightcrawler's kind of decision that he's just going to look like himself in public now with somebody who has a disability and like do something with that. I don't know that it really gets there, but it's interesting. It's always nice to get a Nightcrawler story.
One thing I wasn't sure though is like those other friends that she had, whether they are actually part of her mutation or not.
Oh.
At one point, I kind of thought that they were part of her mutation. I don't know.
See, that's what we need in the modern day. We need a Hoxbox companion series. It could be a digital first series where they just sequentially go through every like minor background character mutant and give us like one page. Just have an anthology. Get one page of like what do they think about, and just go sequentially through every mutant that's ever debuted on panel. Okay, we're gonna skip the Cyclops stories and do them last. So we're gonna talk about Classic 44 by Ann Nesenti, not our favorite always. Rogue shares an impulsive kiss with someone that leads her afterwards to recommit herself to Mystique's world, leading directly into that Marvel fanfare story that we read a few episodes ago, where she goes on a mission with Mystique. Thoughts on this, Fariha?
Oh, I mean, I absolutely love that. It's like two moms and her, like, because now that I read like X-Men Legacy and how she talks about her two moms and stuff. So it's like really effective from that point of view. And then I wasn't sure Destiny is actually that old. So I know that Mystique is also very old because she had the whole regeneration thing going on. But then, it's like one of those, and also kind of a reminder of like that one panel in X-Men 6, all of that kind of brings together. I absolutely loved it. And I wanted more of this, like more of their lives, before Brotherhood or X-Men comes into play.
Tyler?
So this is one of the story that I remember, but always misremember the details. Because I always thought that this is the time when she
kisses Cody.
Accidentally killed Cody. But not killed, but like,
put him in a coma.
Yeah. So I always thought this was a story about that, but then it's not. It turns out to be not. It's just like a brief.
Because that already happened. That's when she still lives with her parents or whatever. Then she runs away. Then she gets with Mystique. Then this kissing of Freddy happens in this story.
Correct. So this sort of like, intermix in between. But the very first page of her with the bike and things like that, I do remember that scene like vividly in my mind. Whenever I thought about, Rogue and her first kiss, that image always comes up. So, and the other thing also is that like Dwyer is actually a much better artist when he's not trying to imitate Byrne, which is his stepdad, incidentally. And because I think some of the earlier issues of Classics where Claremont inserted pages in it, it was Dwyer trying to draw Byrne style, and it doesn't work. But here in this backup story, I thought it's actually really beautiful. Like, it's really nicely done.
Yeah, I don't know that I had ever read this before, even though I'm a huge lover of Rogue. And the reaction I had was kind of like all of these first class books and young reader books and everything that they've tried to do, making Kitty the focus character or doing like Wolverine or whatever. Where's my book about teen Rogue and her two moms? Like, this is a book that absolutely could run every month. You could do it now. You could do it in the present day. There's so much to explore in terms of Mystique's journey from just how did Mystique and Destiny get together? How did Mystique go from kind of just like petty criminal who kind of was using her power to kind of turn little schemes on people to get into positions of power, to just living this semi-domestic life, but also plotting to put together this Brotherhood of Mutants? Like, there's so much. And then Rogue, just this whole, you could do this whole book of almost Riverdale style of like Rogue's life. Like, Rogue's in school with her long gloves on. Rogue has to go to gym class, but she doesn't want to go to the showers. Like, there's just so much. And I got to the end of this and I'm like, for all the weirdness that Nocenti has mined in her other stories, in this moment, I'm like, here's where Nocenti like really gets it. And I wish I would read this book today.
And the thing is, like, the one panel where Destiny is cooking and, Mystique is like, hey, grab your bit.
Yeah.
That was like such a perfect, like, because you see that in family dynamic in like straight parents so often, but here they're two parents and they're trying to parent the child, and it's perfect. And the thing is, like, no matter what the relationship Rogue has with her mom, she always talks about her two moms, like, and then this is kind of like all comes there. But yeah, so I mean, I've been kind of championing Rogue, Mystique, Destiny series as well, like, because we see a lot of stories about gay couple, but we don't see gay couple with their children. So bring that in, like, a family, like, and all of that. So starts here. This can be like the first like material from Classic 44.
And it definitely, I mean, to tell a brief personal story, it reminds me growing up, on either side of my house, both of our neighbors were gay couples. A couple of women and a couple of men on the other side, neither of whom were out. It was never spoken of. I never saw either of them kiss. It was never said that they were married. But like, in retrospect, and I've talked to my family about this since then, they were both gay couples. And this story makes me think of that. Like, I for one of them, we were really good family friends of theirs, and I would like go to their house sometimes and every so often like eat dinner or whatever. And I can just see the scene, of this couple together, and like, they never held hands, they never kissed in front of me, nothing like that, but clearly they were together. And that's kind of, this is to me the positive side maybe of something that's so obviously queer coded, because at the time in the 80s, I can relate to this. I was surrounded by queer couples who weren't out, but you still believe they had the same loving relationship. Like, why did I think these two men lived together and shared a kitchen and had pet names for each other? I don't know. I just assumed that it was fine that they did. And later when I found out that they were a couple, I was like, oh, well, that makes total sense. And so to me, that's how I read this issue. It's not a good thing that they couldn't be out and we couldn't just say that they were together on panel. But I think it actually really resonates with me because that was my experience with closeted people around me, or even if they weren't closeted full time in their lives. Right, they were closeted to me as their neighbor in my life.
Black Tom and Juggernaut will want to have sex with you, like, And then wasn't there also another? Because I very vividly remember there was one panel where Mystique tells Destiny, "You were screaming in your sleep."
Yeah, and that was later on in Uncanny X-Men.
Yeah, there was like one scene where she says that. I don't know how I know that. And like, it was like, I think I read it as like, characters who were queer all the time. And then that panel is used. It's like, when two ladies just live to, like, you don't do that in a house when you have separate rooms. You don't do that.
It was also so like, randomly, I mean, not casually dropped, because I think Destiny was just walking down the staircase and basically just saying, "Oh, yeah, you were not sleeping very well last night," or something like that. And I was like, and then like, and that's it. Then it wasn't mentioned again or whatever. And then it's like, oh.
Yeah, now we can talk about people tinkling with their saucer's finger. How far we've come.
Yeah, but wait, let's go back to that two-parter that I think
man,
has a lot to say.
The Queen's Gambit starring Cyclops. So it's classic X-Men 40 and 41. It's the only true two-parter of all of these classic X-Men issues, and it's really interesting. Tyler, why don't you? I know you like these stories. Why don't you set us up here?
Well, I mean, basically, this is the story which, in some ways, I think was Claremont trying to write the origin stories of Sinister, but it was later on being retconned. But the thing is also is that he's filling in a lot of gaps in terms of like how Scott grew up in the orphanage, how he felt abandoned, how he closed in on himself, and then I could actually not really use that very last page of this two-parter because I think it diminishes the impact of the whole thing. But the
last page being that Xavier finds him at his worst moment.
Yeah. So I mean, it diminishes the whole the situation that Sinister put him through, right? Because every single step of the way where Scott almost achieved happiness, it was being taken away. So, and I find it really, on one hand, it's really creepy, but the other hand, it's like, it's really sad because, Cyclops could have turned out to be something very different. And, it could be, Fariha might be like, oh, yeah, I love Cyclops.
Just think of how different it could have been.
Yeah.
Fariha, what did you think of the Tiny Tyke Psych in this? What did you think of his story at the orphanage?
A lot of time he was talking about how he's damaged goods and that's why nobody wants him. I'm like, let me hate you properly. But then at the same time, there's other mutants who were also abandoned and they turned out fine, so you can do it too. but the Nate was Sinister, right? Because as soon as the Nate, his friend Nate was always there, I'm like, ugh. And
he's so negative, such a negative, cynical little kid too. Except for it's really Mr. Sinister.
Yeah, and then the doctor actually said he looks like a kid, but he's like that demon who pretends to be. I'm like, this is
Yeah.
I mean, I wish there was a little bit they showed that he had a darker hair or a gaunter skin and stuff that would have made it more apparent. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's his brother got adopted, he couldn't be, and then he was just abandoned again and again, and then right when he was on the verge of abandonment, he was meant to believe that they just dropped it, but they were actually killed.
Yeah,
all of that was
that was bad. I know.
But why?
It's so sad.
Why is Sinister after him?
Okay, so bless you. The original Claremont story or origins for Mr. Sinister is that Mr. Sinister is actually this kid, and the character Mr. Sinister is the dream form of this kid. So the kid just dream out of this thing. So it's a product of from the mind of this kid, which is why Sinister has this kind of childish name.
Yeah.
Right? Because which respectable villain will call myself Mr. Sinister? I mean, it's only a kid would think of it. So, and this kid is obsessed with keeping Scott with him. So that was the original origins from Claremont, which of course later on got retcon, and
because the thing is, in recent in Gillen's X-Men, Sinister says that you are the mutant prince, that that you want to be the mutant prince, and that's why you kind of always find the right mate for you or whatever. I'm like, what is his obsession with him? And he stole his stuff and then created cable and all of that. I'm like,
Yeah.
what is it?
I know. It's just,
Why?
Yeah,
But to be honest, if this was actually the true thing, that would have made so much more sense. Like this kid grew up to be him.
Right, because it's a little incongruous because Sinister, now we know, had at this point been around for decades. Like he had so much power, so many resources, and he's basically just like spending years gaslighting this preteen kid to what end, right? But first of all, you have to think at the time, this was like a really thrilling. You're like, what? All of this misfortune that Scott has hinted in again and again about being in an orphanage. Sinister was the engineer of all of that. Like it was, even if you didn't have that whole Sinister is the shadow self of a kid kind of aspect of it, it was like really, really gripping. But the other thing is, Claremont just writes a really good story. It's like Scott at the orphanage showing Scott trying to be empathetic, but the other kids are also mean to him. And like Scott can't find a way out. It does a lot with Scott's trauma. He can't really remember anything about his parents, even though he was old enough to have some memories about them. I think it also goes to, if you have read...
The world burns all the time.
Yeah, or like Jay Edidin's Cyclops one-shot as part of these Marvel snapshots that Kurt Busiek has been cultivating over the last year. Of course, Jay is one of the hosts of Explain the X-Men, and Jay has a very specific take on Cyclops that he's, possibly neurodivergent, and that's a part of his story as well. And I think that really comes through for me here, having read it after having read Jay's issue of that Cyclops snapshot. It just really, really makes him into a much wholer character that makes it easier to understand him, I think, in the present day. And also, so then you have to kind of like fan canon Sinister's whole jam. Like, why can't Sinister just let it go? Or why can't Sinister just abduct him or just take him and clone him or whatever? Yeah. And the thing that I've decided is that Sinister really wants to see his powers develop. And he doesn't really, Sinister's like too vain and has too many other things going to just like actually babysit this kid for however many years. So he's like, we're just going to keep him where I can keep an eye on him and where he's having the worst life ever, so that once his power develops, I can kind of swoop in and be like, oh, I see you're a mutant. And because he knows he's been following this Summers bloodline, and Havoc, for whatever reason, is not as interesting to him, although there is a flashback in X Factor -1 where he's also kind of looking into Havoc's life. And I think that, you get this, the reason that last page is the way it is because Sinister's probably about to spring it on Scott. He's killed these potential adoptive parents. He's gotten rid of the doctor. Anybody who could possibly intercede and get in the way of him like bringing this child up for his own, almost in this very like Sleeping Beauty kind of way, right? And then at the moment that Sinister almost has it in the bag, Xavier shows up, and Sinister has no recourse against Xavier at this point. So he's like, foiled again.
Yeah. And knowing his past with Xavier, he must be really pissed. But yeah, it's kind of like, other version of like, why is Wolverine into Jean? Like, it's like he's an immortal. Why is he into this girl? Like, or like if you look at the Twilight or any of the other like vampires into like the teen girls, like why they like, it's the same thing with Sinister too. It's like, why that boy? Like,
yeah, and then why are you like he's obsessed with the bloodline, but like why are you like why are you his roommate in the orphanage?
Yeah.
It's just
and why don't you know about Moira? Like, I would go after that one. That's like the way powerful mutant than anything. But yeah, I mean, it just like I don't know, the whole, it was really scary, but I wish this was the origin. Damn, that was like scary.
Yeah. But at the end, I mean, even if it's not, I still think this is like a really, really good story, right? Because I mean, this thing did stuck with me too. So like I do remember snippets of this thing. Even like I do remember that his potential adopted parents were killed, but I don't remember the doctor becoming like changing and becoming uncaring. So,
but it's not the same doctor though, right?
The doctor
is killed. That's
no, the doctor wasn't killed.
Oh, the way I read it, the doctor was killed and he just put a clone.
Oh, a clone.
That's how I read it too.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it makes sense in the retcon, but didn't make sense back then. So but yeah.
Well, these are highly recommended. I would say that these two, actually 3 of these, I think both the Cyclops 2-parter in 41 and 42 and the Rogue story in 44 are some of the like can't miss classic X-Men backups, along with that the whole
36.
36. Which one was 36?
The Moira one.
Right, more in the 36,
Yeah.
and then 7, which is I think the Hellfire Club one, where they're like seeing what they're going through in the same night of the Sentinels, because they're actually reprinting that one as part of this whole Hellfire Gala in the current X books, which I think is pretty cool, but no spoilers. So yeah, I'm really happy with this classic read. I've paged through so many of them. My guide is one of the only places on the internet that correctly explains where they all fit. And even in my explanation, I originally based it off of this X-Men official index to the Marvel Universe, which has X-Men and all the X-Men characters indexed all the way through, let's see, where does it leave off? It leaves off right around where Fariha just got to, 509, 510. Well, she's past that now, but it has all the classic issues indexed in it too. And at the time, I just kind of took the word of this and kind of put them where I thought that this was saying to put them. But now that I've read them through a few times, there's actually some degrees of difference where they really should be placed. These things, as official as they may or may not be, they're ultimately fallible, and your read could still be a better read. Just because Marvel's put out one version of it doesn't mean it's always correct. So the point that I'm getting to in all this is like, these really did add a lot, and I got a lot of additional stuff. And I do think a couple of them are essential. Some of them are trash, but some of them are really, really essential.
But some are really weird.
Yeah, especially the Anacenti is writing them. So look, we only have 2 more classic issues left, and we're going to tackle them next episode. So our next conversation is going to be about Uncanny X-Men 135 and 136. We're going to do 137 as its own episode. You'll find out why next episode. And then next episode, we're ending our reads of classic X-Men with 37 and 38. Both of them are Dazzler stories, which probably happen sometime shortly before or shortly after her appearance in 129 through 131. So we're just going to read them here as if that's what Dazzler's doing during the Dark Phoenix saga.
Guys, I cannot wait.
What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be on this reread.
You guys have been having such a good time doing these rereads. I'm like, I want to get on this. Where have I been?
Well, Harry, you haven't read any of this Claremont X-Men though, right?
That's a good point. I have not. We should read something else. That's my idea. Give me a little bit of time to think about this. I got something cooking. I think we're gonna like it.
Okay. I don't like the sound of this at all.
Yeah, it's a little suspicious, I think, but we'll see what you come up with.
Wait, you guys. I think you'll be entertained.
Okay.
I'm sus.
So that has been our Epic X-Men reread for this issue, and the reason that we get together and do this is why, Fariha?
X-Men is better when it's read together.
That's right. And there's a lot of deeper themes that you can access when you have multiple voices around the table to talk about this stuff. So we hope we've brought up some themes maybe you haven't noticed before. And if you have some to share with us, we would love to hear them as well. So if you're watching this, please leave us a comment here on YouTube. If you're hearing this as a podcast, head over to Twitter and send me an at Crushing Comics, and I will share it with the gang. But until we see you next time for Uncanny X-Men 135 through 136, on behalf of myself, Tyler, and Fariha, this has been another Epic X-Men reread here on Crushing Comics.